Okay, so I've never done a live before on my channel. Also, I haven't filmed a video for this channel in years, but just wanted to hop on because I am currently working on making a new batch of Kyphi Incense and just got my hands on this book, which I'm really excited about. It's Sacred Luxuries, Fragrance, Aromatherapy, and Cosmetics in Ancient Egypt. And the recipe that I'm using is from this book, and partially taken from Michelle Bellinger, who I've watched a bunch of their videos on like how they make incense for this particular Kyphi batch. So I'm kind of just going through the process of getting all the ingredients ready. And so first thing that I'm doing today is getting all of the ingredients kind of mixed into the pot, because they have to go into this giant copper pot and sit in here for about 5 days. This pot is specifically for Kyphi making. It's brand new to me, but I wanted to record, or at least go live, to have some record of me doing this in case anyone was interested. But I've also got my notes here, just because the amount of ingredients in this book is to make so much incense that there's just no need for me to make this much. So I'm going off of this kind of thing here. And first thing that I need is 2 cups of raisins that I'm going to chop up, but I'm not doing just raisins. I've made Kyphi in the past, and I like to use the raisins, but I also like to include dates. I feel like it gives a bit more depth to the overall fragrance of the incense. And specifically, I like to use Adra or Almedina dates. I find that they have a better kind of fragrance than normal medjool dates do. So these are the ones that I'm using today, but if you ever decide to make this on your own, feel free to use all raisins, all dates. If you want to use golden raisins, go for it. I'm just using normal organic Thompson raisins, and I need 2 cups total for this recipe. So I'm gonna grab a measuring cup. Don't mind the kitchen, it's gross. Got my measuring cup here, and I should have about 2 cups of raisins in here already, but again, I'm going to chop them up and then kind of see how much I have after they're all chopped, and then kind of split it with some of the dates. So also, I can kind of see the chat because I'm on my phone, so if people are commenting, I do see it. I just may not be able to read it right away. And so in this book, when it talks about using the raisins, it mentions in some places to take out the pit. So there is some evidence that it may not have been this raisins, and it may have actually been dates originally in Egypt. But in other recipes, it doesn't mention to do that. So there's kind of a lot of ambiguity around this incense particularly, and whether or not the Kyphi did use raisins, or whether it used dates, or whether it used both, or something entirely that we just don't have now that was around in antiquity. So I'm just going to give these a nice chop. I want them to be pretty small so that when they go into the pot and get mixed into the incense, there's not just giant chunks of raisin. And I also have to keep my dog away from eating these if they fall on the floor. But Kyphi is a ancient Egyptian incense, kind of as I've said, that was burned at nights in their temples. And if you ever want to get a more in-depth look at this incense, I highly recommend Michelle Ballinger's live videos that they've posted making this incense. They've done a lot of research on the materials needed, and it is not a cheap incense to make, I will say. I don't know exactly how much I've spent on the ingredients. Some of them are quite expensive, and there is not really a substitute for some of them. One ingredient in particular, we kind of don't really know what that ingredient is, which is piquer. And so for my recipe, I'm just not including that item because, again, we have no idea what it is. There are some evidence that it could be something like opium or hash. Could also be a sycamore fig, which is a type of fig tree in Africa. We know for sure that it is not like sandalwood because there is a hieroglyph for sandalwood. So we're pretty sure that it is not that. But I'm just getting these nice and chopped. And I'm aiming for like basically unrecognizable pieces of raisin, essentially. So, sorry that the angle's kind of bad, but basically I am currently just chopping a bunch of raisins and trying to get them all kind of set up. See if I can get it angled a little better, but there we go. Hopefully the phone will stay. We'll see. But just chopping these up right now. And yes, mint is good. I do have mint in this particular batch. I did not have any spearmint on hand, so it is going to be peppermint. But I've used peppermint in a batch of Kyphi in the past, and I actually kind of like the smell of peppermint versus the spearmint. So that's kind of a personal preference, I guess, though. But any kind of mint will really work. You could use catnip too if you wanted, because it is technically also in the mint family. All right, so these are almost about where I want them, and then I'll start on the dates. But I've been making some variation of this incense for probably 10, 11 years or so. The way that this batch is going to be made, I have not done before. It involves kind of cooking everything together and, or I guess heating it all together, which I've never done before. It also involves like letting everything sit in the wine for about 5 days to kind of marinate, which I've also never done. the use of the copper pot is also new to me. So this is a much more, I guess, traditional or modified traditional version. I've done a quick version where I mix the honey and the raisins and wine and let that sit, and then we'll blend that into like a kind of a mixture and then add that to all the dry ingredients. All right. Just checking to make sure there's no like really big pieces in here. And gathering everything together, and this is always my least favorite part because it's all really sticky. All right. So I think I've got these about as chopped as I want them. So I'm just going to make sure I've got about a cup of these. So a little less than a cup here. So I'm just going to chop up a few more of the raisins really quick. Don't need much to get the cup that I need, so I'm just doing a little tiny bit extra here. All right, so that should be enough raisins. And so then these are just going to go into this pot. I'm just going to hang out there for a bit, and then I'm going to start on these dates. I need a cup of the dates as well. Now, these dates are not pitted, so I will need to go through and pit all of these as well, which probably will take longer than I want, but that's fine. Take out the pit. And then for anybody that's just joined, I am currently working on a batch of Kyphi Incense, which is a ancient Egyptian style of incense. Kyphi is actually a Anglicanized version of a Hellenized word for incense in the Egyptian language, which was kapet. And this particular incense was burned in the temples of Egypt, particularly at night. It was also used as a medicine as well, and appears in the Ebers Papyrus, which is a medical papyrus, and can be used as like a breath freshener and a bunch of other medical uses to this. Most of the items that are in it are probably safe to consume. It's literally just resins and herbs and fruits and wine and honey. I don't know if it would taste very good. It does smell very good, but I don't imagine that I would want to eat this myself, so don't advise that. This is always my least favorite part, is just going through and cleaning out all the pits of the dates when I use dates. Every now and then when I make the version that I'm used to making, I will just use all raisins. I've made some batches using different kind of dried fruits, which I guess are not technically true Kyphi, but are like variations. I've done figs before. I made one with apricots and white wine as opposed to a red wine. For this batch today, I'm using a Greek wine called Mavrodaphne. It's a very sweet, kind of almost dessert wine. And then as I'm pitting these, I want to make sure that I'm getting any of the little like paper fibers that are attached to the seeds inside out as well, just because they can make the process of like getting these cut down pretty difficult. So but you can like cut them open, or as I've kind of switched to at this point, I'm literally just ripping them in half and pulling the pit out of the middle. Whatever works for you. But I'm making this particular batch because I wanted a large amount of the Kyphi, just because I have a bunch of friends in my Wiccan tradition. I'm in the Blue Star tradition of Wicca, and I like to make enough that I can gift to other people in my tradition so that they're able to use it. So I normally make pretty big batches anyway, but this particular recipe does make quite a lot. At some point, I would like to try to make the full recipe that is in the book that I'm using, but I feel like I may need a larger pot for that. So for now, we've got this. I could theoretically double this batch with the size of pot that I have. Oh no, well, we lost a date. It is somewhere on the floor. I'll find that later. I was saying I would like to double it sometime just to see like how much I can make in this one pot without it being too much. But for now, I think this will be a good kind of starting off point just to gauge how much this pot will actually hold. And the use of the copper pot in this is pretty important. So there is a chemical reaction that will happen with copper and acidic foods, which normally would make it not great for cooking. Copper is used a lot for like candy making and other like certain applications, But acidic foods, it's not really the best. But for this particular incense, we kind of want that reaction to take place. Which is part of why this pot will never get used for food and is strictly for incense making. So it's kind of my little witchy cauldron, I guess, if you will. All right, 2 more dates and then we are done with this part, and I can wash my hands again because they are quite sticky. All right, last of the dates. They are all pitted. Now I just gotta chop them up and wash my hands really quick. If I had gloves, I would wear them for this just to make it a little bit easier, but I don't know where all of my nitrile gloves have gone, so I'm just gonna do a few of these at a time, kind of group them together. And they are quite difficult to chop just because they are so sticky. So they will kind of group together when you try to cut them. But that is okay. We're going to be mixing everything together anyways, so it's not that big of a deal. And my favorite knife is kind of missing at the moment, and so the knife that I'm using is not really the best. It's really good for like chopping meats and stuff because it's kind of like a cleaver. It's not great for this, which sometimes needs a bit more easy to hold knife. Especially since it's so sticky, I kind of want to like hold it like this. That doesn't really work with this particular knife. So I'm going to see if I can find something better. Give me one moment. Okay, so this is not my favorite either, but it is better because I can actually get the rocking motion that I want to be a little bit more comfortable. And just like take a few and like mash them together. Which does make it a bit harder to cut when they're kind of fused, but in the interest of saving me time, that's what I'm going to do. And then just because I really like Ajwa dates, I'm going to steal one for myself. If you like dates and you find that like the normal medjool dates are a little too sweet, the Ajwa dates tend to be a little less sweet, but they also have kind of like a not quite cinnamon, but almost cinnamony flavor to them. Definitely more caramel flavored and honeyed than like regular medjool dates. I have made Kyphi using the medjool dates before. Turns out just fine. Like the scent is still there. But for Kyphi, I tend to prefer the Adra or Almedina dates just because of the scent that they give compared to the medjool dates. It's a little more nuanced. It's a little bit more depth of scent, I find. And you can easily make this with just all raisins. There's nothing wrong with that. You could make it with all dates. I think really any kind of dried fruit would work. If you are trying to go for the more traditional version, all raisins would probably be the closest. Even though some recipes seem to indicate that they may have used dates, but without going back to ancient Egypt, it's kind of impossible to know what they actually used. So all of this is kind of an approximation anyways. Sorry, my phone was being weird. Now, I do have all the other ingredients already ground and chopped. I did that yesterday just because I didn't want to deal with all of that tonight. But I got the raisins and the dates today and wanted to have something to do while I sit here and talk to everybody. So I will say, if you decide to make this incense, highly recommend investing in some gloves if you don't like to have messy hands. This process of cutting up the raisins and the dates, your hands will get quite sticky, and it's not the worst thing in the world. But if you're like me and don't really like to have sticky hands, it can be a bit of a nightmare. And I really hope that people could actually hear me, because I have no idea what I sound like right now. I don't have my headphones in, so I'm not sure if the mic is picking everything up. I guess we'll find out at some point. I will say this part is a bit of a workout. The raisins were a bit easy because they're not as sticky, but dates do have quite a bit of moisture content still left in them, even though they are technically a dried fruit. So I just have to like keep going and rinsing off my hands a little bit. And you may not have enough dates to get me 1 full cup, which if that's the case, no worries. I still have a bit of raisins left, so I will just sub out what I don't have with the extra raisins. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a full half and half of the raisins and the dates. That's just kind of what I was aiming for, but I will take what I can get. And so kind of a bit about this recipe. So it is a mixture of a bunch of different ingredients. So there are, just kind of read them off. So there's raisins, which chopping up already, and I'm doing half dates, half raisins, or close to half dates, half raisins. Wine, traditionally there would have also been Oasis wine, which you cannot find in the US. I've looked. Oasis wine is wine that is made from dates as opposed to grapes. I do want to try making it myself at some point. Maybe for my next batch of Kyphi, I will work on making some date wine so that I have that. But I'm just going to be using Mavrodaphne, which is a sweet Greek red wine. And there are a bunch of references that state that the wine that the Egyptians drank was known for its sweetness. So Mavrodaphne would be the closest that I can get to anything traditional, or at least in terms of sweetness. And then there's honey, and you want it to be raw honey, unfiltered if possible, but definitely raw. Local, if you can get it. If you can't, something that is still raw, unfiltered, good quality honey. I really like the Whole Foods brand because it's just organic honey. It has been filtered, so it doesn't. It is like purely cleared honey. I do have a ton of other honeys that I could put in this if I wanted to like split it, but I didn't want to like not have enough of the honey and like have to worry about making sure I have the correct amount. So I just bought a big old thing of it specifically for this. Frankincense and myrrh. The frankincense and the honey kind of get boiled together towards the end, which I will have hopefully another video up for that. But you boil those together, reduce them down, and then that gets added into the dry ingredients. Dry ingredients would include gum mastic, which is a specific resin from an island in Greece called Chios. It's often referred to as Chios mastic. It's used as a natural chewing gum, which I quite like as a chewing gum. I'm maybe a little weird on that. It does taste kind of piney, very resiny, because again, it is a resin. But I really like it as a chewing gum. And then pine resin or rosin is also used. They would have used a very specific kind of pine, most likely an Aleppo pine, but finding Aleppo pine resin is a little difficult. So any pine resin will work. As long as it's not cut with anything. You want it to be pure pine resin. which you can usually easily get, so no big issue there. Mint, and really any kind of mint will work. I'm using peppermint because it's what I had already in kind of like my herbal apothecary. I also prefer the peppermint. I've made my version of Kyphi, which also uses mint, and used spearmint, but I find the peppermint lends a better scent for me. So that may just be personal choice. You could also use catnip because it is technically in the mint family. Or really any sort of mint that you wanted to use, you could use in this. Chocolate mint, pineapple mint, any of the mints would work just as fine. And then we've got sweet flag, which is also known as calamus root. And that is used kind of as a binder of sorts. It kind of helps the sense of all of these kind of meld together a little better. If you don't have calamus root, you can also use orris root. I usually use orris root for storing my finished Kyphi because it doesn't have a scent on its own really, and it helps to keep them dry and moisture free. And then we have aspalathos or honeybush, which you can get as a tea. The brand that I'm using is this Davidson's Organic South African honeybush, and it's really great on its own as a tea, and it's also sometimes known as rooibos. There are different kinds of rooibos, but I'm using this particular honeybush this time around. And then camel grass, otherwise known as lemongrass, and then cinnamon, but specifically true cinnamon. So a lot of the cinnamon that we get here in the US is actually cassia, which is technically in the cinnamon family, but it is not a true cinnamon. True cinnamon would be like Ceylon cinnamon, kind of cinnamon that smells kind of like red hot candies. It's a bit sweeter, kind of more sharp cinnamon flavor. And that's the kind of cinnamon you want to use for this. You could use cassia, but it doesn't give you the same flavor that true cinnamon would give. And then cyperus root or nutsedge, which the only place that I've been able to find it kind of easily is Chinese medicine stores. I got mine from Plum Dragon. It's also known as jiangfu, which is, again, nutgrass, and it's the rhizome of the plant. Sorry I'm wiping my nose so much. I have COVID, so that has been fun, or at least recovering from, so my nose just will not stop kind of running. But they are these little rhizomes. Let's see if I can get one to show. So they're kind of tiny, and they are hard as a rock. Grinding these in a mortar and pestle, almost impossible. I bought a coffee grinder from Amazon, and I was expecting it not to work because it was like a $15 Amazon Basics coffee grinder. Best coffee grinder I've ever used for this. I have another one, different brand, upstairs that cannot do what this little $15 one did. So you can try a coffee grinder. It's possible it could break, but mine didn't. Worked just fine, so we're going with it. And then juniper berries, and then pine nuts or pine kernels. And then the last item is the piquer that I had mentioned. But because there's a lot of ambiguity in what that could actually be, I'm not going to be including it. Now, if I had the option to use hash, I would be okay with that. I am a big proponent of psychoactive plants, and considering this incense was often used for like prophetic dreams and opening doorways and things like that, using a psychoactive plant would be quite appropriate. But I don't have access to hash, so we'll not be using that in mine. There's also some theories that it could have been opium. I'm clearly not putting that in here. If you wanted to replace it with something, you could probably put pretty much anything. I don't think it would matter too much. I'm leaving it out, and I kind of like the idea of leaving it out because there's some history about this incense where it kind of symbolized the recreation of Osiris and like collecting his body parts after he was dismembered by Set and putting him back together. And if anyone is familiar with that story, there was one body part that was not found, and that was his cock and balls. So I kind of like the idea of this plant that I'm pronouncing as pecker, which could be pecker, not being included because we don't know where it is or what it is. And if we are making this as a incense for Osiris, leaving out his pecker, pretty appropriate. Just I think. Just find it really funny. So, and in Blue Star, we have a what we call paths of power, and we always joke that this one of the super secret ones is the path of power of rationalization. And so you can rationalize why I'm not using one ingredient, because I just don't have it. Cutting these dates up is taking a lot longer than I thought it would, and oh, I found one that had not been pitted. Oh no. All right. So I'm just kind of smushing all these into little patties, which will hopefully make it a little easier to chop. Caught that with my leg. Okay, I do need to find that one that I dropped because my dog is looking for it. Okay, crisis averted. I mean, dogs can't have dates, but I try not to let her get things off the floor when I'm cooking in the kitchen, just because sometimes it's like onions or things that she can't have. So I don't want her to think that she can have this one item, even though she can. But one of my sneaky tricks to get my dog to take her meds sometimes, I know a lot of people use cheese, but I will take a date and cut it open and put a little bit of peanut butter inside and put the pill in the peanut butter and then close the date up. And she thinks she's getting a little treat because she loves dates. All right. And I kind of like how these look once you've like sliced them. It kind of looks almost like, have you ever had like biltong? And I like are almost like stained glass even in the light here. I don't know. It just looks really, really cool. And this is just a bunch of the dates kind of like smushed together. I like how the light kind of shines through some parts of it. And I'm actually going to seal another one for myself because these are really good. Kind of sad I didn't get 2 boxes of them because now I want some for myself. And in terms of like dried fruits, speaking of like dried fruits that I like to eat, I'm not a big raisin fan. Dried figs, dried dates, cherries, blueberries, any other dried fruit, love them. Not the biggest fan of raisins. Golden raisins are a bit of an exception, but like just regular Thompson raisins, not my fave. I was like, this is definitely much more of a workout than I thought it would be. All right. And like I thought, I will definitely need some more raisins. I don't have quite a full cup, so I'm just going to use all of the dates that I've already cut up, put those into the pot here, and then I'm just going to chop up some more of these raisins really quick. Oh. All right. Just gonna get all these raisins into the pot. All right, and now for all of the other ingredients. And I am missing my little spatula, so give me one moment. It was just in my box of stuff. Okay. So next we just need to start adding all of the other dry ingredients into this big pot. Except for the frankincense and the myrrh. Those go in towards the end. The frankincense gets melted with the honey, and the myrrh is the last thing to go in at all, right before you start to form everything. But we need 3 tablespoons each of gum mastic, pine resin, mint, calamus root, honeybush, lemongrass, and cinnamon. Got my little tablespoon measure here. And my bag ripped, so that's a great start to this. So 3 tablespoons of mastic. And then 3 tablespoons of pine resin. And then 3 tablespoons of the mint. And you do want these to be kind of finely ground. I got all of mine down as close to powder as possible because I want the final product to be very kind of uniform. I don't want a lot of chunks in it. And then 3 tablespoons of calamus root, which I buy mine already pre-ground just because it's a bit easier for me. And then 3 tablespoons of the honeybush. And here's kind of what we got going on so far. It's literally just a mix of the dried fruits and all of our powders and stuff. And then after the honey bush, we're going to do our lemongrass, another 3 tablespoons. And then the last of the 3 tablespoon ingredients is our cinnamon. And again, you want to use true cinnamon or Ceylon cinnamon. And mine was a little short on that last scoop. All right. And next comes the kind of big part. So we need a half a cup of each of these ingredients. So the cyperus root, juniper berries, and the pine nuts. Half a cup plus 2 tablespoons. And it appears that my half cup scoop has gone on a walkabout, so we're just gonna have to use something else. Here we go. This little pampered chef thing is my best friend. So I'm gonna do half a cup of the cyperus root. I'll do the 2 tablespoons first. 1, 2. And the smell on the cyperus root is not anything that I can really describe. It's not like any scent that I've ever smelled. It's woodsy, kind of almost like almost kind of like I don't want to say barbecue, but like definitely like smoke and wood. And I had just enough of that. Good. Right. And then half a cup of our juniper berries. And then the additional 2 tablespoons. All right. And then the pine. Oh, and if you could smell my kitchen right now. I'm just trying to mix this up a little bit because the The dates definitely like sticking together a bit more than the raisins do. So I'm just trying to break them up, kind of like you would butter in a pie dough, like getting it cut up so that the can mix in with the flour. Once the wine goes in, that'll help too, because everything will get kind of softened up anyways. Once they soak up some of the liquid. Because we are adding quite a bit of wine to this. It's about 3 cups of wine going into this. So, and then last is the pine nuts, which when you grind these up, you want to be really careful because it will go from ground pine nuts to pine nut butter very fast, and that is not what you want. Right. And then the additional 2 tablespoons. And because mine are a little circular, I'm just going to add a tiny bit extra just to make sure that we have enough of the pine nuts. And for anyone who has joined in late or anything like that, I'm currently making Kyphi Incense. I'm going to move the cutting board out of the way so I can put the pot in the front so everybody can see the pot, because all of the ingredients have been put in here now. So this is kind of what we're working with. It doesn't really look like much right now, just a bunch of stuff in a pot. But I will see if I can maybe flip it around, kind of show what's going on. So this is what we've got so far. And it doesn't really look like much yet. So I'm just going through and breaking up the dates so that they're a bit more incorporated into the mix. Once the wine goes in, that'll kind of help with everything as well. All right. Set this back over here, and I'm going to get the wine opened and start getting that added in. Now, I'm using a Greek wine, as I've said, but for anyone who is just joining or anything like that, this is a Greek wine called Mavrodaphne. It is a pretty sweet wine, I would say. Kind of similar to ports, almost. At least in my opinion, but it is one of my favorite wines, that is for sure. I will just drink a glass of this pretty much anytime. And for this, we need 3 cups of wine to go in here. There's 2 cups. One cup. And then a tiny little bit left for me to drink. Now I'm just going to mix this wine into these dry ingredients. Gonna soak all that wine up, and let me just tell you, the scent from this was literally just turned up to like an 11. I can't even begin to describe what this smells like right now. And then this will sit for 5 days. I'm just going to show you what's going on in here. So it does not look great. It smells wonderful. But this will sit in this pot for 5 days. At the end of that 5 days, it will get cooked and reduced down. A lot of this wine will likely evaporate over time and kind of soak into these herbs and spices and resins. But this will get cooked down. Once it's cooked down, honey and frankincense will get put together in a pot, and that will also get cooked down. And then you're going to reduce that by about 1/5, the honey and the frankincense. So not a lot of reduction, but enough that the honey basically turns into kind of napalm. It is very dangerous. You do not want to get that honey frankincense mixture on your skin once it's been cooked, while it's still hot at least. But that will get added into this. And then once that is added in, it will be left overnight. And then on that last day, after the frankincense and the honey has set with these ingredients overnight, you'll add in the myrrh, and that's kind of the final portion of the Kyphi. So in about 5 days, I will hop on here again, and we'll do the honey portion with the frankincense, and then the final 3rd day of making the Kyphi, or I guess at that point it'll have been 6 or 7 days. That final day we'll be adding in the myrrh and then mixing everything together and rolling it into balls so that we can dry it. So for anyone who has hopped on and watched, hope this was helpful. I'm really bad at lives, so I don't know why this was the way that I thought to do this, but it was the best way that I could focus on what I was doing, but still make a video about it. So hopefully it was fine. But right now we've just got this like kind of gross slop. But if you could smell this, I don't really know how to describe the smell. It's sweet, it's fragrant. There, you can definitely get the juniper and the resins. The wine really comes through. There are like little pieces of pine nuts that haven't been fully ground. So I'm kind of just like taking the back of the spatula and going through and making sure that everything is well incorporated. But that's basically it for tonight. I'm gonna let this sit and then we'll be back on sometime later. So hope everyone's enjoyed watching. Have a great night.